So what you think is what you are exercising from God's library of possible thoughts. It's not what God is thinking necessarily, specifically in fact, until you think it. And then, since all of thought is part of God as well, God is now also, well, not also, God is necessarily thinking it, because anything that's being exercised is being exercised of God's mind, and that's who God is. So he was not thinking of you in paradise until he was not thinking of you knowing you're in paradise until you know you're in paradise, and then he's definitely thinking of it. And you can initiate this, which means you could also initiate something that he wouldn't otherwise be having thoughts of, and now you are doing it. Now, if he's going to allow that sort of chaos, if you like, because your selection of values and beliefs are, say, not in harmony with him, then he must contain your ability to think independently, or not so much independently. He must restrict your ability to have such thoughts. So, we, as having access to his mind, have restricted access. In general, for instance, a man in the street doesn't seem to have access to what we might want to call miracles. If he's to have access, he must have a certain set of values and so on that makes that access reasonably safe from God's point of view. He doesn't want chaos in his mind, in his self, in his being. And you see, we are part of his being, in that we're a particular algorithm going on, if you like, that has a certain sovereignty. So it contains the sovereignty, so that it's not harmful to the whole of himself. He allows a certain amount of freedom that you learn, in other words, that you acquire values that cause you to select a wider but safe spectrum of thoughts from his mind. And so we develop. And there are procedures for doing this. It might be saying mantras, it might be studying godly things, might be godly company, might be worship, might be some sort of practice of exercise, routine, meditation, prayer, recitation, ritual. They all contribute to setting the scene, adding thoughts to you that constitute what you choose, which is safe, wider but safe. So great powers are given to the saints, so to speak, because the saints are safe from God's point of view. They're not going to cause chaos. They're going to bring about miracles that are, if you like, in accordance with God's will. They have a sovereignty. They choose whether to do this or that and so forth. But that sovereignty is within a safe set of bounds of values that are harmonious enough to allow such, as God understands it. So, to be a bit more practical, if I visualize the presence of the Father in me, well, that's an extremely safe thought to be thinking, because in large measure, even I get right some of the qualities of what God is, some of his values, and I'm imagining I'm thinking such into my being. My identity, now I mean my true persona now, my true person is the selection of thoughts that I am allowed access to. So if I'm a saint, in the spiritual sense, I'm pretty aligned with God, and therefore I have security access into much wider performance of God's library of thoughts. I'm given a much greater freedom because I'm going to use it harmoniously to a considerably greater extent than, say, the man in the street. And you can become eligible by wanting such. You know, do you want to love God? Oh, well, right. You start to be equipped accordingly. Do you want to destroy an entire neighbouring nation? You might need a lot of battling to get that access, because that particular spectrum of values and so on that constitutes such a wish, such an intention, would in general not be acceptable to God. There are occasions when clearly it has been, because it's happened. But we obviously can't have billions of people achieving this on and off as an everyday thing. We wouldn't have many nations left. Although I'm being light-hearted about it, I'm not aiming to be trivial, but only to illustrate, of course. So Jesus has it that what you sincerely believe comes to pass. And if you insistently pray, then because of your importunity, God gives way and puts his mind to finding how you can have access to the full manifestation of this thought. Now what we're saying is then that I might wistfully have a thought to so-and-so. To make that thought more and more concrete, I need fuller access than I have. I can apply by keep pressing God that this come about. I have this wish. I mean, it might be for a car. You know, my car, say, is not so good, and I'm wishing for another. And, well, there are circumstances in which you can have a car, but you will need to be a slightly different person in God's mind to have it. by which I mean you will have to have gone through a pattern of thoughts that had you, for argument's sake, going to the bank and drawing the money, or getting a different job that earns you more money, or and saving up. You see, some achievements might require major changes, and we think of them as, oh well, how can you do so and so? And what we think of as doing so and so is in fact going through a whole series of pattern of using God's thoughts, creating this picture where you apply for a different job and get a lot of money and manage to save up and finally go along to the garage and buy the car. In other words, there's a definite thought procedure you've got to go through the experience of to achieve that. Access to the car is not instant. In a miraculous case, prayer is made that so-and-so is healed of cancer and he's healed on the spot. Why? Because God has equipped you with this access, this ministry, and He's equipped you with the sovereignty of exercising it in great measure compared to, say, the man in the street. Doesn't mean to say it's valid in itself. It means that it's valid from God's point of view because it achieves something, is something that is harmonious with the rest of what He's doing. It might be to teach, for instance, a tiny part of it might be to teach me that this is not the way to go. That simply miraculous healings are not of long-term value, say, in the sense of doesn't necessarily bring the person healed nearer to God, and therefore they get something similar next week. You know, other demons come in, and so on. So you're not going to have a grasp of the whole mind of God to know why some people have greater powers than others, why Hitler's allowed to do what he did. You know, it's just incomprehensible to us because we don't have the totality of God's mind. Now, obviously, Judaic religions don't see it like that. They see it as, oh no, God is defined and Satan, evil, is defined, and it's an outside of God phenomena. And there's this terrible battle going on, which it's a fight of good and evil, but God will win. In some sense, though, implying that He's not won at the moment. He's still in the battle, and evil has considerable sovereignty to do evil, because obviously God wouldn't want the devil to do evil unless the evil the devil's doing in some sense achieves good. And that's unacceptable, of course. You know, how can you possibly look at the Holocaust and say it's bringing good? Especially from specifically God's point of view, that doesn't make sense to a particular understanding of God, etc. So that's not an open option in the Judaic persona. Thought selection of God. It could conceivably be so with the whole or a large part of God that has a function in the whole. And what I'm saying is that why God allows something or doesn't is, as far as I can see, inscrutable, because you'd need to have the totality of God's mind to understand why. And by definition, we do not have that. We are a subset of sovereignty within God, contained and constrained according to what that subset is, according to the will of God and his totality. Let me pause a sec.